The robots are coming for our jobs. That is the headline everywhere, right? It feels like you can't open a browser tab or scroll through your feed without seeing another article about how AI is getting ready to make us all, I don't know, gloriously unemployed.
It really is the narrative of the moment.
From baristas to bankers, the algorithm is supposedly coming to eat our lunch.
And it's a genuine anxiety. I mean, it's the existential dread of the modern worker.
Yeah.
And because of that anxiety, we're seeing this massive resurgence in a very specific, almost utopian economic idea.
Yes. The big solution proposed by, all the big thinkers in Silicon Valley and a growing number of politicians.
Universal Basic Income, UBI.
Right. The idea of free money for everyone. The government just cuts a check, no strings attached, to sort of cushion the blow from automation. It sounds like a sci-fi dream, doesn't it? We all just sit around painting watercolors while the robots do the dishes.
That's the pitch.
But, and this is where today's deep dive really begins, what if this grand solution is actually a trap?
That's the provocative question we're going to tackle. We're going to argue, and this is based on some really fascinating data and macroeconomic theory, that UBI is not the silver bullet for the AI revolution. In fact, for a huge part of the world, specifically for the global south, for developing nations, it could be a recipe for an absolute inflation disaster.
So today, we're going to be trashing the handout model and instead proposing something that feels far more radical.
It's a shift in perspective.
We're exploring a concept called universal basic assets, or UBA. The goal isn't just giving people income to spend, it's about giving them the tools to build real sovereign wealth.
Exactly. I mean, we need to move the conversation from how do we feed people who have been made obsolete by technology to how do we empower people to build capital with technology? Because if you just feed them, they remain dependent.
Forever dependent.
But if you help them build capital, they become free.
Okay, so buckle up. We are going to explain first why UBI in developing nations is what our sources call a mathematical mirage that almost certainly ends in tears and, worthless currency.
And then after we've sort of laid out the problem, we're going to introduce you to a concept called economic apartheid.
It's a heavy term, I know, but it's a necessary one.
It really is. It describes the invisible velvet rope that keeps the world's poor locked out of the financial system.
And we'll break down the four walls of that prison. There's the identity wall,
Which is a huge one.
the minimum investment threshold, predatory fees, and something called liquidity constraints.
And then after all that doom and gloom, we're going to make the case that a specific technology, Bitcoin, is the digital crowbar to pry those doors open.
So we're swapping melting ice cream, that's fiat currency, money that loses value, for a digital piggy bank that could actually get heavier over time.
We'll explore what's called the labor-to-asset conversion thesis. It sounds a bit technical, but the core idea is actually very, very human. It's about letting people store the value of their work in something that can't be stolen from them through inflation.
And look, if you want to dive even deeper into the nuts and bolts of Bitcoin after this, we've got you covered. We have a whole course on YouTube. It's a playlist of our previous Bitcoin-related deep dives. We'll drop a link in the description so you can become a true sovereign wealth connoisseur. But for now, let's unpack this mirage of UBI.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Satoshi.
And I'm Satoshi.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so start us off with what the outline calls the fiscal impossibility theorem. That sounds like a law of physics, but I assume it's about money.
It might as well be a law of physics.
Why can't developing nations just, print money and give it to people like the U.S. did during COVID? I mean, we saw stimulus checks work here, sort of. Why can't India or Brazil just fire up the printers and do the same?
It all comes down to a concept in economics called exorbitant privilege. And this is probably the most crucial thing to get your head around to understand the whole issue.
Okay, exorbitant privilege.
The United States, and to some extent the Eurozone, they issue the world's global reserve currencies. The entire world needs dollars. They need dollars to trade oil, to settle international debt, to buy manufactured goods from China.
Right. The dollar is the world's operating system for money.
It is. So when the U.S. Federal Reserve prints, say, $1 trillion, that money doesn't just stay in Ohio or California. A huge portion of it flows out into the global system. It's bought up by other central banks, by corporations, by anyone who needs to transact globally.
So we basically export our inflation. We have this giant global sponge that just soaks up all the excess liquidity we create.
Precisely. It's a massive shock absorber. But developing nations, the global south, they do not have that luxury. Their currencies, the Indian rupee, the Nigerian naira, the Argentine peso, are essentially closed loops.
Meaning they don't have that sponge.
No sponge. So if the Reserve Bank of India prints a massive amount of rupees, those rupees pretty much stay in India. And, when you flood a closed room with water, the water level rises fast. In economics, that water level is prices.
So if a country like India or South Africa tries to roll out a massive UBI program funded by printing, the math just completely breaks down.
It shatters. Let's look at the numbers because they're pretty staggering. Our sources analyzed a proposal that was floated in India for a UBI of about 10,000 Indian rupees per year.
Okay, 10,000 rupees. Let me just do the conversion on that. That's roughly, what, 120 US dollars a year?
Exactly.
That's barely a Netflix subscription in the West. It doesn't exactly sound like retire on a yacht money.
It sounds incredibly modest. But you have to look at the scale. When you multiply that seemingly small amount by 1.4 billion people, the cost absolutely explodes. It would consume a catastrophic percentage of their GDP, something like 10%.
Wow. Okay, so how could they possibly fund that?
Well, to do it without printing so much money that the currency instantly collapses, the state would have to make huge cuts elsewhere. Specifically, they would have to scrap a critical piece of their social infrastructure, the public distribution system, or PDS.
Okay, hold on. Explain the PDS, because I think for a lot of us in the West, we think of welfare as a check in the mail or a food stamp card. But the PDS is actual. It's actual stuff, right?
Correct. It's not cash, it's food security. It's a system of subsidized wheat, rice, sugar, fertilizer, and fuel. It guarantees that even if the market price of rice doubles, a poor family can still walk into a designated shop and buy it for a few pennies. It is a physical safety net against price shocks.
So the UBI proposal, in essence, is saying, we're going to take away your guaranteed cheap rice and your guaranteed cheap cooking fuel, and instead, we're going to give you this cash.
Yes. And here is the deadly trap. The moment you remove those subsidies, what happens to the market price of rice and fuel?
It skyrockets.
It goes through the roof. So you give a poor family 10,000 rupees in cash, but suddenly their annual food bill goes up by 12,000 rupees because the subsidies that were holding the prices down are gone.
So it's a zero-sum game. Or actually, it's a negative-sum game for them. You're taking away their guaranteed food security and replacing it with cash that immediately buys less than what they lost.
Precisely. The analysis from the IMF and other sources suggests that for many low-income households, replacing the PDS with a cash UBI would result in a significant net loss of purchasing power. You are exposing the most vulnerable people to the kind of market volatility they simply cannot handle.
And we saw a very similar reality check play out in South Africa, didn't we?
We did. It was a very live debate. Yeah. During the COVID-19 pandemic, they introduced something called the Social Relief of Distress Grant. It was a temporary measure.
Right.
And there's a huge political push to turn that temporary grant into a permanent universal basic income. But then the Treasury actually ran the numbers. And the fiscal reality was just brutal.
What did they find?
To fund it sustainably, without just printing money into oblivion, it would require tax hikes of up to 25%.
A 25% tax hike on top of existing tax? That's insane. That would just suffocate the formal economy.
It would absolutely crush the private sector. And you have to remember, South Africa already struggles with incredibly high unemployment. If you suddenly tax businesses an extra 25%, are they going to hire more people?
No, they're going to fire people. Or pack up and leave the country.
Of course. So you end up shrinking the entire economic pie in a desperate attempt to slice it a little more evenly. And that's the fiscal impossibility. You cannot print value out of thin air. You can only redistribute what already exists. And if you try to redistribute it too aggressively in a fragile economy, you risk destroying the value creation engine itself.
Which leads us directly into the next big problem, the inflationary feedback loop. I think this is the part that so many people miss. They think, oh, I have more cash in my pocket, therefore I'm richer. But the COVID era really taught us all a painful lesson that that's not necessarily true, did it not?
It was a brutal, global-scale, natural experiment in monetary policy.
Right. If everyone suddenly has more cash, but there's still the same amount of stuff to buy, the price of that stuff just goes up.
Let's walk through the mechanism because it's like a four-step spiral, especially in what we call supply-constrained economies. Step one, the government injects liquidity. They print money for the stimulus or the UBI.
Okay. Simple enough. More money is now floating around in the local village or the city.
Step two, That new money immediately starts chasing a static supply of essential goods. Now, in the West, when people got stimulus checks, some of it went into the stock market, some of it paid down debt, some of it was saved.
Right.
But in the global South, for the poorest populations, what economists call the marginal propensity to consume is near 100%.
Meaning if I give you an extra dollar, you spend that entire dollar immediately.
Immediately. On food, on cooking fuel, on medicine. Because you need it to survive. You're not putting it into an S&P 500 index fund or buying NFTs. But here's the problem. Because the infrastructure might be poor, the roads are bad, the factories are old, the electricity grid is unreliable, the supply of food and fuel can't just magically increase overnight to meet this new demand. So you have a massive surge in demand hitting a brick wall of static supply.
And Econ 101 tells us that equals much higher prices.
Much higher. This leads to what's called agflation, agricultural inflation. Food prices, the most essential prices for the poor, are the first to spike. That brings us to step 3, which involves the currency itself. As the central bank keeps printing money to fund this deficit, the value of the local currency plummets against the dollar.
And since most of these developing nations have to import key commodities, things like oil and fertilizer.
Exactly. Those imports suddenly become way more expensive, which then drives the cost of producing and transporting food up even further. It is a vicious, self-reinforcing death spiral.
And then comes step 4, which you've called the inflation tax. I want to dwell on this for a second because I don't think we in the media and, public discourse, we don't call it a tax enough.
We absolutely should. It is the most regressive, cruelest tax imaginable.
Why is that? Why does it hit the poor the hardest?
Because the poor hold almost 100% of their wealth in the form of cash. They don't have real estate portfolios or gold reserves or diversified stock holdings. They have bills stuffed under a mattress or in a jar. That's their life savings.
So when inflation hits, the rich who own all the assets, they're actually protected or they even benefit. Their house is suddenly worth more, their stocks are worth more. But the poor person holding cash just watches their purchasing power evaporate into thin air.
It's gone. UBI funded by printing money is, in effect, a massive wealth transfer from the poor cash holders to the wealthy asset holders. It's the exact opposite of what it's intended to do.
And we have some really stark, modern examples of this in action. I mean, look at Argentina.
Argentina has been a living laboratory for this. They've seen annual inflation exceed 200%. Imagine you had a fixed sum UBI there, say 1,000 pesos a month. Within 6 months, that money buys you a tiny fraction of what it used to. It becomes functionally worthless.
So what's the counter argument? Couldn't you just index the UBI payment to inflation? Say, we'll raise the payment every month to match the rising prices.
That's the road to hyperinflation. If you try to do that, you create a feedback loop that guarantees the currency's destruction. You're pouring gasoline on the fire. You print more to match prices, which only serves to raise prices faster, which forces you to print even more. Next thing you know, you're Weimar Germany or modern-day Zimbabwe carrying wheelbarrows of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
So it's a trap. UBI, in these contexts, it promises relief, but it delivers devaluation. But there's also a political angle here that we need to touch on, isn't there? It's not just about the math. It's also about power.
Absolutely. This is what political scientists call the clientelism risk.
Clientelism.
If your daily survival, your ability to feed your children, depends entirely on a monthly check from the government, then the government effectively owns you. In nations with weak democratic institutions or a history of corruption, UBI becomes a terrifyingly effective mechanism for political control. Vote for me and my party, or the checks stop.
It creates a permanent state of dependency rather than fostering liberation and independence.
Precisely. The critics argue, and I think it's a very powerful argument, that UBI centralizes survival in the hands of the state. The poor don't need a stipend to help them survive in poverty. They need a vehicle that allows them to escape it entirely.
And to escape poverty, you don't just need a flow of income. You need a stock of assets. You need wealth that can compound over time.
Correct. And that brings us to the absolute core of the problem. Because it's not that the poor in the global South don't work hard. They work incredibly hard, often physically harder than any of us. The fundamental problem is this system of economic apartheid.
I really think that's such a powerful term. I mean, I hate what it describes, but it's an incredibly effective image, economic apartheid. It implies a deliberate structural separation.
It's the idea that the poor are not poor because they're lazy. They are poor because they are structurally and systematically barred from converting their labor into lasting, productive assets.
It's an invisible cage. It's the VIP lounge of global finance, and the bouncers at the door are very, very strict.
And our sources have identified 4 specific walls that make up this cage, this system of apartheid.
Let's break them down one by one. Wall number 1, the identity wall.
KYC. Know your customer. In the West, we take this so for granted, it's almost funny. You walk into a bank, you show your driver's license, maybe a utility bill with your address on it, and boom, you have an account.
Standard procedure, takes 10 minutes.
So what if you don't have those things? In rural Africa, in parts of India, in Southeast Asia, hundreds of millions of people lack formal, state-issued documentation.
Right. No birth certificate because you were born at home with a midwife. No utility bill in your name because you live in an informal settlement where the power is, unofficially sourced.
And without that piece of paper, that government stamp of approval, you are a financial ghost. You were completely blocked. You cannot open a bank account.
Yeah.
You cannot open a brokerage account. You cannot buy government bonds. You can't even get a formal loan.
So you're forced to operate entirely in the cash economy, the informal economy.
Which means your savings are constantly vulnerable. Vulnerable to physical theft, vulnerable to degradation. I mean, literally rats eating the bills, and as we've already discussed at length, vulnerable to the silent theft of inflation. The identity wall ensures that hundreds of millions of people remain unbanked and therefore assetless.
Okay, so let's say somehow you manage to scramble over that first wall, you get a government ID, now you run smack into wall number 2, the minimum investment threshold.
This is the problem of indivisibility, or what some call lumpy assets. Think about real estate. It's the primary way the middle class preserves and grows wealth globally.
Sure.
But you cannot buy $10 worth of a house. You can't buy a square foot of land.
Right, it's lumpy.
Right.
You have to buy the whole lump, which costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So if you only manage to save $10 or $20 this month from your labor, you can't put it into real estate. It's not an option. Okay, what about gold? In a place like India, gold is a huge traditional savings vehicle. But if you go to buy very small quantities, like a single gram of gold, the making charges and the premiums are enormous. They can be 15–20% above the spot price.
So you're immediately down 20% on your investment just to get in the door. That feels less like an investment and more like a tax on being poor.
It is exactly that. And what about stocks? Equity markets in many developing nations have minimum trade sizes, or, more commonly, flat brokerage fees that absolutely destroy small investments. If the fee to make a trade is $5 and you're only trying to invest $50, you've just lost 10% of your capital instantly to a fee.
The result is this brutal divergence. The poor are forced to save in cash, which constantly depreciates, while the rich are able to save in assets, which compound and appreciate.
The system is designed to make the rich richer and keep the poor poor.
It really is expensive to be poor, which is a perfect segue to wall number 3, predatory transaction costs.
This is a direct tax on the value of labor, and it is just infuriating. The most egregious example by far is remittances.
We're talking about migrant workers, say, from the Philippines working in Dubai or from Mexico working in the U.S., sending money back home to their families.
Yes, that money is a lifeline for millions of families, and the system preys on them. Sub-Saharan Africa is the most expensive corridor in the world to send money.
What are the numbers like?
The global average fee for a remittance is around 6–7%. In Sub-Saharan Africa, for transfers under $200, it's often 8–10%, sometimes even higher.
It's outrageous. So if I work all week and send $100 home to my mom so she can buy medicine, the financial system just skims $10 off the top just for the act of moving some digits from one computer to another.
That's right, and that $10 might represent hours or even a full day of hard labor. It creates this massive constant drag on wealth accumulation. It's money that should be circulating in the local village economy, buying food from the local farmer, but instead it's going straight to the bottom line of a company like Western Union or MoneyGram.
Okay, and that brings us to the 4th and final wall, liquidity constraints.
This is a subtle one, but it's incredibly important. It's about the liquidity premium. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, or more likely in these contexts, harvest to harvest, you cannot afford to lock your money away for 5 years in a government bond. You can't buy a piece of land that might take 6 months to find a buyer for and sell.
Because what if your kid gets sick next Tuesday? Or what if a drought ruins the crop and you need money today to buy food?
Precisely. Your life is volatile. You face constant, unpredictable shocks. Therefore, you need your assets to be extremely liquid. You need to be able to turn them into cash 24/7.
And historically, the only asset that had that kind of instant liquidity was physical cash itself.
Right. But As we've established, cash is a melting ice cream cone. It's
Mm.
a leaky bucket. So the poor are trapped in this paradox. They are forced to hold the worst possible long-term asset, cash, because of their need for immediate short-term liquidity.
So to recap, the system is completely rigged against you. You can't get in without an ID. If you get in, you need a lot of money to even start investing. When you try to move money, you get charged these huge predatory fees. And you can't even afford to buy the good long-term assets because you might need your money back tomorrow.
It is a perfect storm designed to keep people in a state of financial servitude.
And this is why we argue that UBI doesn't fix the fundamental problem. Giving someone more melting cash in a system that is designed to block them from saving it properly, it doesn't solve poverty. It just subsidizes it temporarily.
It's treating a symptom, not the disease.
So what we need is a solution that doesn't just give people more cash. We need something that actually breaks down these four walls. We need, as you said, universal basic assets.
And the argument from our sources is that the technology to actually do this, for the first time in human history, has finally arrived.
Enter Bitcoin.
Enter Bitcoin.
Okay, let's unpack this carefully. And I want to be really clear for everyone listening. We are not talking about crypto in the broad, chaotic sense. We're not talking about meme coins or celebrity-endorsed scams. We are talking very specifically about Bitcoin as a decentralized monetary network.
A very important distinction.
So how does Bitcoin function as this digital crowbar against those four walls of economic apartheid?
Let's just go through them one by one. It maps perfectly. First, the identity wall, KYC.
The bouncer at the door?
Bitcoin is permissionless. To get a Bitcoin wallet, you don't need to ask anyone for permission. A wallet address is simply a cryptographic key that you can generate on a cheap smartphone for free in about 30 seconds.
So no bank manager, no utility bill, no government ID.
None of it. Mathematics does not care about your nationality, your credit score, or whether your parents registered your birth. If you have the cryptographic key, you own the asset, period. For the unbanked, the identity wall doesn't just get lowered, it evaporates. A refugee fleeing a war zone with nothing but a smartphone is banked.
That is genuinely revolutionary. Okay, what about wall number 2? The minimum investment threshold, the lumpy asset problem.
This is solved by Bitcoin's visibility. One Bitcoin is made up of 100 million smaller units. These units are called Satoshis, or sats.
Satoshis, I love that name. It sounds like a currency from a sci-fi movie.
And it allows for incredibly granular savings. It means you can save 50 cents worth of Bitcoin, you can save 1 cent. There is effectively no minimum entry fee to start saving.
So a daily wage earner in Manila or Lagos can take the tiny bit of surplus from their day's labor and immediately convert it into the hardest monetary asset on earth, even if it's just 1,000 Satoshis at a time.
Exactly. You no longer have to wait until you've saved up thousands of dollars to buy a lumpy asset like a house. You can buy the digital equivalent of a single grain of sand of gold instantly and just keep adding to your pile grain by grain.
You know, that has to change the entire psychology of saving. If you know you can save even a tiny amount and it won't be eaten by fees or inflation, you're so much more likely to actually do it.
It makes saving possible for the first time for millions. Now, wall number 3. Those predatory transaction fees.
Right, the 10% Western Union remittance tax.
Bitcoin fixes this through a technology called the Lightning Network. This is a layer 2 solution that's built on top of the main Bitcoin blockchain. You can think of the main Bitcoin layer as the final settlement layer. It's like a central bank wire transfer, slow and expensive, but very secure.
Okay.
The Lightning Network is like the cash layer. It's for everyday transactions. It allows for instant peer-to-peer transactions that cost effectively nothing. We're talking fractions of a penny.
So that migrant worker sending $100 home, instead of Western Union taking $10, the Lightning Network takes what?
A fraction of a cent. Maybe 1 or 2 cents at most. So the other $10 stays with the family, it stays in the local economy, it's an automatic 10% pay raise generated by pure technological efficiency.
That is enormous. Okay, and finally, liquidity, wall number 4.
Bitcoin trades 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, on thousands of exchanges all over the globe. It is the most liquid market in the world. You can convert it into local purchasing power anywhere on the planet, instantly.
So it offers the scarcity and value holding properties of something like gold.
But with the velocity and spendability of cash, you don't have to wait months to sell it like you would with a piece of land. You get the best of both worlds.
I saw a phrase in the source material that I really liked. It called Bitcoin a thermodynamic vault.
It's a fantastic metaphor. Think about it. In Nigeria, holding the local currency, the naira, Means you are guaranteed to lose 30, 40, maybe 60% of your labor's value every single year due to inflation. That's leakage. You are running on a treadmill, working harder and harder just to stay in the same place financially.
And Bitcoin is a technology designed to stop that leak.
It allows you to convert your human energy, your labor, immediately into a digital asset that cannot be debased by political decree. It captures what some call the deflationary dividend. As technology like AI makes goods and services cheaper over time, your money should actually buy more, not less. Hard money like Bitcoin captures that benefit for the saver.
It's a complete paradigm shift. It's moving from a mindset of, please give me a handout to survive, to I have locked the value of my labor in a vault that you cannot touch.
Exactly. It's about sovereignty.
Now, before we get into the really exciting real-world examples, because this isn't just theory anymore, this is happening on the ground right now, we have a quick word for all of you listening.
Yes, and this is really important for the future of what we're trying to build here.
We absolutely love doing these deep dives, and we know a lot of you listen on audio platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Fountain.fm, which is amazing. But we have this vision to bring these deep dives to life visually. We want to use this tool called the Mosaic AI Video Editor to create these stunning visualizations of the concepts we talk about.
Imagine actually seeing that inflationary feedback loop as a spiraling graphic, or watching an animation of how the Lightning Network routes a payment across the globe.
But these professional tools, they cost money, and to unlock the funds we need for the software license, we have a very specific, very clear goal.
We need to hit 1,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. That is the magic number.
And here's the data point that, I'll be honest, it haunts us in our sleep. Right now, only 1.97% of our listeners are subscribed on YouTube.
Less than 2%. We know you're out there.
We get it. We're an audio show for now. But please, help us break this cycle. If you are enjoying this, if this is providing value, if you want to see this show get a massive visual upgrade, please just pause for a sec. Well, don't pause the audio. Just open the YouTube app and hit that subscribe button.
Your subscription is literally the key to unlocking the next level of content on AI, finance, Bitcoin, and Spirit.
It truly is. Help us get past that 2% ceiling. Okay, back to the deep dive. We've laid out theory. Let's talk about reality. Section 4, mechanisms of empowerment. You mentioned the Lightning Network for remittances. Is this actually happening at scale?
It is, and it's growing incredibly fast. It's often called streaming remittances. We are seeing entire corridors, like from the U.S. to the Philippines or to Mexico, where people are bypassing the banking cartels completely.
And you mentioned it's not just about individuals sending money home, it's also about merchants, right?
Yes. This is huge for the informal economy. Small merchants in places like El Salvador or Vietnam are starting to accept payments directly via a smartphone app. Historically, they could never accept credit cards because the point-of-sale terminals are expensive and the fees from Visa or MasterCard are too high, like 3%.
But with Lightning, their smartphone is the terminal.
Exactly. A street food vendor can now accept a digital payment from a tourist or a local that settles instantly with virtually no fee. It's a way of integrating the massive, vibrant, informal economy into a global digital payment standard without any intermediaries taking a cut.
That's amazing. But there's another mechanism that I find even more fascinating, the idea of microwork.
Streaming money. I think this is one of those powerful concepts.
So connect this back to the beginning. We started with the fear that AI is coming for our jobs.
Right. But what does AI need to function? It needs massive amounts of high-quality data. It needs humans to train it. It needs images labeled, audio transcribed, data verified.
And who is doing that work?
Increasingly, it's people. All over the world, there were these new platforms emerging like Stakework, Remotasks, and Bitwage that facilitate this. But here's the revolutionary part. On a platform like Stakework, you get paid for your work instantly in Bitcoin delivered over the Lightning Network.
So you don't have to wait 2 weeks or a month for a paycheck to clear?
No. You can log in from your phone in Kenya, spend 15 minutes labeling images of cats for an AI model, earn, say, 1,000 Satoshis, and have that hard money in your personal wallet 30 seconds later.
That is just, it's mind-blowing. It's a market-based basic income. It's not a handout. It's accessible to literally anyone on the planet with an internet connection, and it completely bypasses all local banking restrictions and capital controls.
Imagine you're a student in the Philippines who needs money for books. or a stay-at-home mom in India with a few spare hours. You can now plug directly into the global digital economy, perform valuable work, and get paid in a hard asset that no one can take from you. No bank account needed.
And then there's the most surprising, almost counterintuitive mechanism of all, Bitcoin mining. Now, usually when people hear Bitcoin mining, their minds immediately go to the environmental concerns. They think it's wasteful.
That's the common narrative.
But the sources we looked at talk about mining as rural development. How on earth does that work?
This is the gridless compute model that's being pioneered in East Africa, and it is absolutely brilliant.
Walk me through it.
So imagine a small, remote hydropower plant in a rural village in Kenya. These small-scale renewable projects are great, but they often produce excess power, especially at night, when everyone in the village is asleep and demand is low.
And electricity is a use it or lose it product, right? You can't just bottle it up easily and save it for later.
Exactly. That excess energy is called stranded energy. And normally, that energy is just wasted. It dissipates as heat. And because the power plant can't sell that wasted energy, it has to charge the villagers who are using the power higher rates just to cover its own operational costs.
Okay, so I see where this is going. Enter the Bitcoin miner.
Gridless installs a small modular data center, basically a shipping container full of Bitcoin miners right at the site of the hydro plant.
Yeah.
And they become the buyer of last resort. They buy that excess energy, the energy that nobody else wants, to power their miners.
So the power plant suddenly has a new, consistent revenue stream for a product it was previously throwing away.
Yes. And that new revenue stream completely changes the economics. It makes the entire renewable energy project financially viable. And in many cases, it allows them to actually lower the price of electricity for the local village and even fund the expansion of the grid to connect more homes.
That is absolutely wild. So Bitcoin mining, the thing everyone says is bad for the environment, is literally funding and subsidizing the rollout of green energy in rural Africa.
It creates a community asset from wasted energy. And we're even seeing this applied at the nation-state level. You just have to look at the Kingdom of Bhutan.
Bhutan, the tiny Himalayan kingdom.
That's the one. They are blessed with massive, untapped hydroelectric resources from their mountain rivers. And for the last few years, the government has been quietly using that excess hydropower to mine Bitcoin. They are accumulating a national treasury of a pristine digital asset.
So instead of taking on debt from the World Bank or the IMF, they're creating their own sovereign wealth fund.
Without taxing their citizens a single dollar, they are converting their most abundant natural resource falling water directly into a global reserve asset. It's a form of state-level UBA. It creates a powerful economic buffer against future shocks. It's a treasury built on physics and cryptography, not on debt.
This is a perfect bridge to our regional case studies. We have to start with Nigeria.
Nigeria is the vanguard. It is the heart of the peer-to-peer resistance movement.
Let's give the listeners some context. The Nigerian government hasn't exactly rolled out the red carpet for crypto, have they?
Rolled out the red carpet, they tried to ban it, they explicitly forbade regulated banks from servicing crypto exchanges. It was designed to be an extremely hostile regulatory environment.
And yet, despite that, Nigeria consistently ranks as having one of the highest crypto adoption rates per capita in the entire world. How is that possible?
Because the people need an escape hatch. The national currency, the naira, has suffered catastrophic, unrelenting devaluation for years. If you are Nigerian and you save your money in naira, you are guaranteed to become poorer every single day. So the people simply bypass the formal system. They turn to P2P markets.
Peer-to-peer?
Right. Platforms like Noonies, Paxful, or even just encrypted groups on Telegram and WhatsApp. It's just individuals connecting. I have Bitcoin I want to sell. You have Naira you want to get rid of. Let's make a trade. The government can try to shut down a centralized exchange, but they cannot shut down millions of individuals trading directly with each other on their phones.
And it's crucial to understand the motivation here. This isn't rampant speculation. They're not trying to buy a Lambo.
Not at all. The survey data is crystal clear. Something like 67% of users in Nigeria identify primarily as savers. They're using Bitcoin as a savings technology, a way to preserve the value of their labor from the ravages of their own central bank.
Yeah.
It's financial self-defense.
And we see a very similar dynamic playing out in Latin America and in Turkey.
Absolutely. Turkey has had runaway inflation with the lira for years. For them, Bitcoin is seen as digital gold. It's a hard asset, but it's also portable. If things get bad and you need to leave the country, you can't easily carry a dozen gold bars across the border. But you can carry $1 billion worth of Bitcoin in your head just by memorizing a 12-word seed phrase.
And Argentina has the famous CIPO, right? The capital controls that strictly limit how many US dollars citizens can legally buy.
Right. The government tries to trap them in the failing peso. So the people turn to the black market, where they use Bitcoin and dollar-pegged stablecoins to do everything for daily savings, for buying cars, for closing real estate deals. It has become the inflation hedge that the government cannot easily confiscate or control.
And finally, that brings us to El Salvador, the little country that became a giant global experiment.
The first state-level experiment. They took the radical step of making Bitcoin legal tender alongside the US dollar.
And the stated goal was twofold, right?
Yes. First, to bank the unbanked. Over 70% of their population had no access to a bank account. And second, to capture all those remittance savings we talked about earlier by encouraging people to use the Lightning Network instead of Western Union.
It's an incredibly bold move. It's a developing nation attempting to shift its foundation away from a dependency on the US dollar and international debt and toward a sovereign, decentralized asset standard.
And look, the experiment is still young, it's still playing out, and it hasn't been without its bumps and criticisms. But the historical significance cannot be overstated. It is the first developing nation to officially say, we are looking for an off-ramp from the existing fiat game.
So after this whole journey, what does it all mean? Let's try to bring it all home. We started this deep dive with the fear of AI and the proposed solution of UBI.
And I think the question we have to come back to is this. When the tech leaders and politicians in the West promote UBI, whose interests do they truly represent? Are they proposing a solution that actually liberates the poor, or one that perhaps unintentionally keeps them in a state of perpetual dependence?
The philosophical pivot here feels huge. The idea that a handout isn't real freedom. That true freedom is having access to a system where your savings, your stored labor, can actually grow and compound over time.
It's about ending the inflation tax, this silent, invisible pickpocket. For decades, the global poor have been the primary victims of a monetary system that systematically steals their time and their energy through currency devaluation.
And what we've explored today is the idea that UBA Universal Basic Assets, enabled by a technology like Bitcoin, offers a potential way out of that trap. It's a vision of a world where the poor are no longer clients of the state, but are sovereign owners of their own capital.
A world where they can finally capture the deflationary dividend of technology. Whereas AI and automation make the world more abundant and goods and services cheaper, their money should actually buy more, not less.
That is a very powerful and very hopeful vision for the future. But hey, we know this is an incredibly complex and controversial topic. The story is still unfolding in real time.
Absolutely. We're analyzing the data and the sources we have available, but we genuinely want to hear from you, our listeners. Are we being too optimistic about the potential of Bitcoin here? Are we being too critical of the UBI proposals?
We invite you to debate this with us. Jump into the comments section on YouTube. We're always looking for collaborators, finance experts, crypto natives, academic researchers. If you have a sharp eye for detail and can help us refine this thesis, please reach out.
Because knowledge is a community project.
It certainly is. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on YouTube to help us unlock those visuals. And until next time,
Keep searching.
keep the quest on.
I'm Satosha.
And I'm Satoshi.